Jonathan, this idea of an industry group is an interesting one. I know Facebook and Instagram have also said in the past they'd like to see regulation. What do you think would actually work? Because they'll go back and forth and make the argument that look, everybody else is doing this. Teens are actually spending more time on TikTok. You can't really come after us and expect this to get changed. And maybe that's a valid point. If you were to create regulation, let's set aside the industry group for now. Let's just say regulators were going to come after this. What should that regulation look like, and why hasn't anything been done to date if there's so much bipartisan agreement?
It's a very good question. So there are a few things. Let me just say, on the point of creating a watchdog group, there is such a group today. It's called Common Sense Media. It's the largest child advocacy organization in the United States. They have a very strong position on social media. They literally have offered policy recommendations today that Facebook could accept, and they were part of our Stop Hate for Profit coalition last summer. But what could happen right now? Number one, regulators need to revisit Section 230. Simply put, to make the companies, Facebook, and by the way, other social media services, liable for the content they publish, like every other media company in the world.
Okay, let's start on that point by point. Let's do this, because I know the counterpoint to that is that this is really hard. We were talking about that in the last hour, too, and it is. Yeah. It's difficult when you've got millions, if not billions, of people posting things to try and go through and police all of it. And it's always been protected by the idea that this is more like the CompuServe situation, where it's just a bulletin board. We are not the editors of any of this. We're just here kind of posting whatever is out there in the community. What's the argument that you would take to that?
Well, it's no doubt that it's technically complicated. But you know what else is complicated? Building a company in 16 years that reaches 3 billion users and generates $30 billion in revenue every quarter. I mean, so Facebook or Meta Platforms is the most sophisticated advertising platform in the history of capitalism. So yeah, technically it would be complicated. I'm not trying to understate that. But they have more resources, more engineers, and more innovation at their disposal than almost any other company on the planet Earth. So, look, there are things you could do right away, Becky. Age verification. The reality is you could make people verify their age in order to use the products.
How do you do that with kids who are under 16 or 17, don't have a license?
Maybe they shouldn't use the product at all, period. Like, let's realize that there's no natural law that dictates that we need to have social media, fed to us via like an intravenous tube the moment we're born. The reality is it's a commercial product, and the reality is, like opioids or like other addictive substances, it's causing damage to minors. It's harming society, and the industry has demonstrated they're incapable of self-regulation.
Hey, Jonathan, I will say at some point I'm pretty sympathetic to these arguments. I think that something needs to be done. However, I also am looking at who to blame, and maybe it's Congress. Like, by the way, if you want something done, regulating just Facebook, regulating just Instagram is not going to do it. If you really want these things taken care of, stop tiptoeing around and do something. Say what can and can't be done. If you want to make sure that they're not using algorithms to float hate back to the top, then do it.
I couldn't agree more. There's no question that, look, as someone who comes from industry, I worked in Silicon Valley for years. I believe in self-regulation, but since the companies haven't been able to be responsible in that way, you're right. Regulators need to act. And let's be clear, Congress has a role, but so does the FTC. It's long overdue for the FTC to open up some processes and get the ball rolling. And it needs to be more than just Facebook. Twitter is a good example as well. The degree of toxicity on that platform is mind-bending. TikTok is an area as well. They've taken strides, but have so much more to do. So, Becky, it's an industry-wide problem. And I would just say, to be real simple, number one, we need more transparency. These companies should open up their data so that researchers and journalists and regulators can understand what's happening under the hood. Number two, algorithms shouldn't be allowed to amplify extremism. I don't think the founding fathers, when they wrote the Constitution and did freedom of speech, intended to be freedom for algorithms. And number three, and finally, these companies should agree once and for all to work with organizations like ADL and other watchdogs to make their products better.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.